I walked into Grandma's hospital room expecting to find her half asleep, maybe watching that tiny TV bolted to the wall. But the sight that met me froze me mid-step. My Aunt Carol was leaning close to her bed, shoulders hunched, voice in that urgent, private tone people use when they don't want witnesses. In her hand were several sheets of thick cream paper, the kind you only see in law offices. And as soon as she saw me in the doorway, she slid them into her tote bag like she was hiding a loaded weapon. "Didn't hear you come in," she muttered, her tone too bright, too fake. Grandma's eyes darted to me, then back to Carol, like she wasn't sure whose side she was even allowed to be on. The room smelled like antiseptic and old carnations, and the rhythmic beep from the heart monitor felt deafening. "What was that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Carol's lips curved into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Just some insurance forms," she said, patting the tote bag. "Nothing worth worrying about. Nothing worth worrying about." But she clasped that tote to her chest like it was a life vest, and the ship was going down. I moved closer, so I was standing right at Grandma's bedside. She looked pale, frail, but not confused. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then shut it with a soft click of teeth. Sometimes you feel a shift in the air, and you just know you've walked into something you weren't meant to see. This was one of those moments. I didn't know exactly what was in that bag, but I knew one thing. Whatever it wasn't just insurance, and I already felt the ground under my feet starting to tilt. But I had no idea then just how high the stakes would get, or how much I stood to lose if I didn't act fast. Shall I write the next chapter? The thing you need to understand is that Grandma wasn't just my grandmother. She was my only real parent. When my mom and dad died in that violent car crash, I was 9 years old and drowning in other people's pity. Grandma was the one who pulled me out. She took me in, made up the spare room with fresh lavender sheets, and told me I'd never have to worry about a roof over my head again. Over the years, she made promises, not the empty kind, but ones carved into our lives. She'd tell me the house would always be mine when she was gone, that she wanted to make sure my education was paid for, that I'd have security, so I'd never repeat the kind of helplessness I felt after the accident. Her will wasn't just a legal form, it was our shared history, a guarantee that the sacrifices she made for me meant something. Carol knew all of that. She was Grandma's only daughter, but she'd moved 2 states away years ago and was never around, except for holidays when she'd swoop in like the hero. Her sudden month-long stay here, just after Grandma had been admitted to the hospital, already felt strategic. And now those papers in her tote bag were tapping at the back of my skull like a drumbeat. Change is coming, and not the kind you agreed to. Leaving wasn't an option. This wasn't about money. It was about the life Grandma and I had built together. If Carol decided to meddle with those promises, it wouldn't just break me. It would break Grandma too. And yet, as I sat there by her bed holding her cool, dry hand, I could feel her pulling back into herself, like she was hiding something on purpose. If she really was hiding something, why now? And more importantly, how far was my aunt willing to go to keep me from finding out? Shall I write the next chapter? The first crack showed up a few days later, small enough that someone less paranoid might have shrugged it off. I'd gone over to Grandma's house to pick up a sweater for her. She hated how cold the hospital got at night. The house was quiet, smelling faintly of her rose soap and old books. I went straight to her desk in the study, the place where she always kept stationery, stamps, and that battered silver letter opener. Usually, the mahogany desk drawers slid open without a hitch. But this time, the top drawer, the one she kept important papers in, was locked. I couldn't remember the last time it had been locked. There was even a thin layer of dust on the keyhole, as if it had gone untouched for ages. Until now. I thought maybe Carol had just organized things, until I went to check the corkboard by the phone, the one that had our whole extended family's phone numbers pinned up. That's when the second thing hit me like a splash of cold water. My name and number, which had been in Grandma's neat, slanted handwriting at the top, were gone. Literally gone. In its place, there was a new list typed on cream paper. Carol's number was at the top now, right above her son's. Mine wasn't there at all. When I mentioned it to Grandma the next morning, she just looked at me and said, "Carol's helping me organize." Her voice was flat, her eyes darting toward the door like she was afraid we'd be overheard. I told myself to pick my battles. Maybe it was harmless, but somewhere deep down, I knew these tiny changes were pieces of something bigger. And if these were just the crumbs, what kind of meal had my aunt already cooked up without me knowing? Shall I write the next chapter? When I finally asked her directly, Carol laughed. Actually laughed, like I'd just told her the most ridiculous joke. We were sitting in the hospital cafeteria, trays between us. She was stirring sugar into her coffee way too slowly, watching the swirl like it was more interesting than me. I leaned forward and asked, "What were those papers you had the other day in Grandma's room?" Her spoon clinked against the mug. "Oh, for God's sake," she said, rolling her eyes. "You're not still thinking about that? You're being paranoid. They're just insurance renewals. Boring, boring paperwork. Honestly, you should focus on keeping Grandma's spirits up, not snooping around like some detective." The thing was, she used that same airy tone she always did when she wanted to gaslight me. Dismissive, with just enough condescension to make you wonder if you were the problem. I'd seen her pull it on other relatives before. It worked on them. But I couldn't shake the way her jaw had tensed for a half second before she started smirking. Or the way she changed the subject to some pointless story about her neighbor's cat. She wanted me to feel stupid for even asking. To doubt myself. That's how she operated. Get inside your head. Make you question whether you'd seen what you saw. Except, I had seen it. And the more she tried to laugh it off, the more certain I became that insurance renewals were a lie. Still, I kept my face neutral, letting her believe the act had worked. Because if she was hiding something, I'd need her to keep underestimating me. And as it turned out, I wouldn't be the only one she'd let her guard down around. Shall I write the next chapter? It happened during Sunday dinner at Uncle Greg's. One of those big, noisy family nights where the TV blares in the background, the smell of roast chicken fills the house, and everyone talks over each other. Carol was in her element, holding court at the head of the table like she always did during family gatherings. I was picking at my food, half listening, when my cousin Jenna leaned across the table toward Carol with a smile. "By the way, congratulations on sorting out the inheritance situation. Mom was saying it's such a relief to have that all finalized." The room went suddenly smaller, tighter. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Carol's hand twitched, but her smile stayed glued in place. "Oh, that? Just making sure everything's in order for when the time comes," she said brightly, as if she'd just organized a spice rack, not gutted a legal document. Uncle Greg nodded approvingly. "Smart to deal with those things early. Avoids a lot of trouble." I kept my face blank, but inside, my skin was buzzing. Finalized? The way Jenna had said it made it sound like what Carol was doing wasn't just in progress. It was done. When dinner ended, I lingered by the coat rack, pretending to be on my phone while Carol chatted in the hall. Her voice dropped to a low murmur as she told Jenna, "Some things are best handled quietly, so people don't overreact." It took everything I had not to storm out right then and confront her in front of everyone. But my pulse was pounding too hard, my thoughts racing with one question. If the will had already been sorted out, where did that leave me in it? whatever part I was supposed to play in Grandma's future. Carol had just rewritten it in ink, and I knew I was running out of time to stop her. Shall I write the next chapter? The next morning, I decided to try the straightest path possible. No hiding, no games. I walked into Grandma's hospital room with 2 coffees, one for her, one for me, and tried to make small talk. Carol wasn't there, which gave me an opening. "Hey," I said gently. "I was thinking, maybe we could just go over the papers together. Make sure everything's in order. That way we're both on the same page about what you want." Grandma looked at me for a long time, her eyes soft but clouded with something that felt like guilt. She set her mug down, hands trembling slightly. For a moment, I thought she might actually agree. But then she whispered, "It's taken care of, sweetheart. Carol's handled it." My chest tightened. Handled? How? That's when Carol breezed into the room, like she had radar for conversations she needed to shut down. "Oh, for heaven's sake, not this again," she said loudly, tossing her purse onto the chair. "She doesn't need to stress about paperwork. I already told you, everything's been taken care of." I pressed on anyway. "Fine, then let me see it." My voice shook a little, but I didn't back down. Carol's smile hardened. "No, you don't need to see it." I stared at her in disbelief. "You do realize that's not normal, right?" She shrugged. "I realize you like to create drama." It was like hitting a brick wall. No matter how reasonable I tried to be, she had an answer ready, each one designed to paint me as ungrateful, unstable, or both. That's when I knew trying to talk my way in wasn't going to work. If I wanted the truth, I'd have to find it myself. And fate handed me my first real break only 2 days later, in the form of an unexpected email. Shall I write the next chapter? It landed in my inbox at 8:47 a.m. on a Thursday. I almost ignored it. The subject line looked like some boring administrative update from the hospital. Document authorization scheduling. But then my eyes caught the CC list. My name was on it. The email itself was from a hospital administrator, addressed to Carol. It referenced confirmation for notary services to finalize legal documents for Evelyn M. as per Tuesday's discussion. Evelyn M., my grandmother. My hands went cold. There was an attachment, a PDF itinerary for the notary's visit, set for Saturday morning, right in Grandma's hospital room. That was less than 48 hours away. The email wasn't even meant for me. I wasn't listed in the body, just accidentally copied because the staff had confused my email with Carol's. I reread the part that made my stomach twist. "Please ensure all required parties are present for initialing and signature." Required parties. Who? Certainly not me, since no one had told me a word about it. I called the hospital directly, pretending to be clarifying details for Carol. The receptionist casually mentioned your aunt had asked to keep this as a small private meeting to avoid unnecessary tension. Unnecessary tension. That was her code for don't let the one person who might object through the door. I sat there at my kitchen table staring at the email, my coffee growing cold. This was it. Hard proof that something was happening, and fast. If Saturday came and went without me intervening, the new will could be signed and sealed before I ever got my hands on it. And the worst part? I'd have to decide right now how far I was willing to go to stop it. Shall I write the next chapter? I barely slept that night, the glow of my phone screen burning into my eyelids as I kept scrolling back to that email. Every scenario played out in my head. Me barging into the hospital room uninvited. Me grabbing the papers right out of Carol's hands. Me getting thrown out by security while she stood there smirking. By morning, the decision had cemented into something solid. Fear wasn't going to keep me still. I couldn't let her corner Grandma while she was weak. Couldn't let her box me out of a conversation about the only home and security I'd ever known. I made a list. Call Grandma's lawyer, contact the hospital's patient advocate, see what my legal rights were. But every lead met a wall. The lawyer said they couldn't disclose anything without Grandma's direct consent. The hospital said if Grandma allowed Carol to manage her affairs, there was nothing they could do. It wasn't just that I needed to stop the signing. I needed Carol to know she wasn't the only one in control, which meant showing up, in person, with the truth in my hands. That Saturday, I arrived at the hospital earlier than the notary was scheduled. Email printed on crisp paper, tucked into a folder. I didn't tell Grandma I was coming. I wanted to see her reaction with Carol right there, when the lies couldn't hide in the shadows. Walking down that hallway toward her room, I felt my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. I didn't know exactly what Carol had told her, or how twisted the story had become. But I knew one thing. In the next 10 minutes, everything between us as a family could change forever. Shall I write the next chapter? When I stepped into the room, Carol was already there, sitting beside Grandma's bed like a guard dog who didn't expect company. The blinds were half closed, the late morning light cutting stripes across the blanket. On the rolling tray in front of them sat a neat stack of papers, the exact kind Carol had told me were insurance renewals. I didn't bother with pleasantries. I walked right in, pulled the printed email from my folder, and set it down on Grandma's lap. "What's this, then?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. Grandma glanced at the paper, then up at me, her eyes flicking nervously toward Carol. Carol stood in one controlled movement, her chair scraping the linoleum. "This is exactly why you weren't invited," she snapped. "You make everything aggressive when it doesn't need to be." "No," I shot back. "I make things transparent when you'd rather keep them hidden." I tapped the email where it said, "Finalize legal documents." "A notary doesn't come in to renew insurance, Carol. We both know what these are." Something shifted in Grandma's expression. A flicker of doubt, maybe even recognition. "Carol told me this was just to simplify things," she murmured. I locked eyes with her. "Simplify for who, Grandma? Because I'm not even listed as a required party. They're cutting me out without you realizing it." Carol's voice pitched higher, brittle but sharp. "She's trying to upset you. Don't listen to this." But it was too late. Grandma's trembling hand moved toward the papers, sliding them off the tray and into her lap. She started reading the first page, her lips moving silently as she scanned the text. The room felt so still, I could hear the air conditioner hum. Then Grandma's hand froze mid-page. Her eyes lifted to Carol, and the look in them was no longer uncertain. It was something far colder. "What exactly," she said quietly, "did you put in here, Carol? Shall I write the next chapter?" Carol's smile collapsed. For the first time, she didn't have a ready script. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried to recover. "Mom, you're tired. You don't need to." Grandma's voice cut through her, sharper than I'd heard in months. "Answer me." Carol's hands fluttered toward the papers, but Grandma pulled them closer to her chest. I could see, even from a step away, the telltale phrases in the formal wording: rescind prior property bequests, authorize primary executor, transfer all assets to beneficiary named in Section 3 OAS, and in Section 3, written in precise typed letters, Carolyn Mitchell. No mention of me anywhere, nowhere in the house, the savings, even the small keepsakes listed for family remembrance. I think Carol saw my eyes catch that line, because her tone changed from feigned concern to a hiss. "She can't maintain the house forever. I'm protecting her from the burden. You're too young to—" "I'm 27, I snapped. "Too young to inherit what she promised me is not a thing." I turned to Grandma, my throat tight. "She's cutting me out of everything. Everything you said would be mine." Carol's jaw jutted forward. "Because you'd waste it." The words hung heavy in the room, and I saw Grandma flinch like they'd hit her. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes wet, then back at Carol with something close to disbelief. "Get me my lawyer," Grandma said finally, each word slow and steady. Carol blanched. "Mom, now." In that moment, I realized the tide had turned. But the fight wasn't over. Because reversing a dirty trick on paper was only part of the war. The rest was surviving the blast radius of what we'd just unleashed. Shall I write the next chapter? Carol didn't move right away. She just stood there, clutching the back of the chair like she needed it to keep herself from toppling over. When she finally spoke, her voice had that sharp tremor you hear when someone knows they've lost control. "You're making a huge mistake, Mom. This is going to tear the family apart." Grandma's reply was ice. "The family didn't start tearing until you broke my trust." Carol's lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line, but she pulled out her phone and stepped into the hallway. I could hear her snapping at someone. Maybe the lawyer, maybe an accomplice. But her voice had lost its smug confidence. Within an hour, a man in a charcoal suit and wire-rimmed glasses arrived, rolling a small briefcase behind him. He greeted Grandma warmly but stiffly, like an old acquaintance who knew exactly why he'd been summoned. Grandma handed him the stack of papers without looking at Carol, who was now perched in the corner like an insolent teenager caught red-handed. The lawyer leafed through the will in silence, occasionally arching an eyebrow. Then he pulled out another folder from his briefcase. The original will, with my name printed clearly in the bequest for the house and the savings account. "This," he said, tapping the original, "is what you signed 2 years ago. Do you still want this to reflect your wishes?" "Yes," Grandma said without hesitation. He slid the new draft back toward Carol. "Then this document is null. We'll destroy it." Carol's chair screeched against the floor as she stood. "You can't just—" "I can," the lawyer interrupted, "because your mother is of sound mind, and she has just confirmed her intentions in my presence." By the time he left, the offensive papers were a pile of shredded strips on the rolling tray. But Carol's face— I'd seen storms calmer than her silence, and I knew that silence had a long fuse. This wasn't over. She'd lost the battle, but the war for this family's future had just entered a new, uglier phase. Shall I write the final chapter?